This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
You cannot run a marathon without getting tired. Doesn't make sense to go to a coach and say, teach me how to run a marathon without getting tired. That's part of the deal. Well, you cannot do creative work without fear. If you don't have fear, you're either a sociopath or, more likely, you're not trying hard enough.
I am of the mindset that we, the people, can't convince anyone of anything, but you might say something that gives people enough to convince themselves. And if you asked me to create a Mount Rushmore of humans who have had a profound impact on helping me shape my style, my guest today would be on it, which is wild for me to even admit because my guest today and I have met once live, lifetime interaction of 3 minutes. We were both at a conference in Colorado about to take a stage for Digital Summit. It was you, me, and Dan Pink. But yet, back in 2003, Seth, I read The Purple Cow as a kid who wanted to be better in advertising in New York City. So let me start by saying thank you. Thank you for going on the journey you've gone on. And you've talked a lot about scale, about like scale and impact and scale. And you've achieved that with me to the point where I'm like, wow, I think this is my thought, but really is it Seth Godin's thought? Because you've had so many good thoughts that have had a profound impact on my life. So I just wanted to start that way.
That's
Thank you so
super
much.
kind. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that.
I guess I have to start. Like, who's on your inspirational Mount Rushmore? And when I think of mine, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about this. When I think about mine, I try not to include my loving family. I keep them to the side. The other three I know very, very well. There's Steve Wilhite, who's a mentor of mine who was hired by Steve Jobs to run marketing at Apple at one point. There's Ron Berger, who hired me for the first time in an ad agency back in New York City. And you're my three, which is cool because you're doing this at scale. You've always inspired me. Four is probably NQ, who's like on Oprah's list of Super Soul Sundays. He's like won slam competitions in poetry. And then when I think about just someone who's like philosophical, but practical and profound, that's where you come into play. I'm hoping this is enough time if you never thought of like who was on your Mount Rushmore. So who's on your Mount Rushmore?
You know, Mount Rushmore is artificially constrained by geology, and we don't need to do that. I'm a fan of the Golden Age, Silver Age comic books, particularly the Justice League. And the magic of the Justice League is they were all these fairly second-rate superheroes, but they each had a superpower that was perfect to solve a particular problem. And what we get to do when we're thinking about inspiration is pick who we need to be like in this moment. Good at what? So my friend Jacqueline is probably not my inspiration for when it comes to cooking dinner, because in all the meals I've had with her, she's never cooked dinner. She's very good at hiring the right caterer. But when it comes to moral imagination and showing up to use our privilege for good, Jacqueline Novogratz is on the list. But I got 40 people on that. Sarah Jones, the Tony Award-winning playwright. You know, when you're facing a blank sheet of paper, you say, what would Sarah do? And my friend Bernadette, who used to live in Perth, Australia, far away from anything as one can be. When you're feeling like an outsider and you're wondering how to gain the traction to have an impact, Bernadette's. So the list I have so long that I can't start going through it. What I am aware of is we have to be very careful about choosing heroes because nobody is perfect, but there are lessons to be gained from different people and how they would do things. And what I try to do is avoid bullies, avoid people who won the lottery but thought they were smart, and mostly stay away from people who are looking for a shortcut. Because it's very tempting to do those three things, and those three things never work out.
I mean, you've been doing this for a while and you've been pretty consistent, right? And when I think about it, I'm not asking you to choose any baby over another baby, but over 20 books, I'm curious how you decide into a project because you probably have so many ideas that you're fiddling with at one time. So how do you pick?
So first, publishing and printing are different things. Anybody with $20 can print a book now. Publishing is a multi-year commitment to bringing a new idea to the public. I only publish a book when I have no choice. And the blog is really useful for that because 365 days a year, I get to share an idea on my blog, reach way more people than a book ever would. And then I don't have to worry about the idea anymore. Done. That's a delight. The new book, This is Strategy, I will spend 30 times as much time bringing it to people as I did writing it. But I had to make a book because it's the only way to get the ideas to work. Because strategy doesn't work if we don't talk about it. And blog posts are better at spreading, but books demand conversation.
When you're in your writing process, how often are you working through the big idea versus where this thing is going?
People who know what they're talking about would tell you that I'm a very sloppy writer, that the architecture of my books doesn't hold up by book standards. They are a reflection of the messiness of my brain. And I used to fight that and try to please those people. And now I don't. The book could be in any order. There are no chapters. It's just, I think this next layer is going to help make a point. And I layer them like a 1,000-layer crepe cake. And it works for me and for my readers. So I don't write that sort of complicated Agatha Christie narrative. What I'm writing is, what's the next argument I need to make to help someone see what I am seeing?
So I could be getting this wrong, so please correct me if I'm off, but this feels like the first time that this is mantra has been, we're in sequel land here. Am I getting this wrong?
Sequel is not the right way to say it. What we are is taking advantage of a brand name that I invented. That's a great shortcut. That wasn't the original title for the book. And I don't always take my own advice, but this time I did.
Yeah, this is marketing. For those of you who are catching up now, this is marketing was, to me, it felt like it was celebrated for philosophical depth. I mean, you're asking people marketers specifically to create trust and permission. So in your mind, what do you hope this is strategy will be celebrated for?
People don't see systems and they don't see time. And if I can help even a few people see systems and see time, I will have transformed the way they do their day. And it's not Neo and Morpheus, but it's similar in that once you see that we are taking for granted all the indoctrination and all the systems that maintain things and push things, and that we can actually make choices about it, it opens all these doors. And once you realize that tomorrow is always coming and that yesterday's gone forever, so many things change in your life. So those are the two things I'm trying to get at.
Well, being on the Courageous podcast, we talk a lot about fear here. I know this is really, really surprising. There is no courage without fear. A lot of people try to suppress the fear versus address the fear. We talk about helping you bring it out because these two concepts are kin, they're siblings. And, they do coexist in your mind. And you talk about this. Fear is like a freedom from fear is one of the big takeaways on the new book. What has been your dance with fear, and what do we, the people, need to learn about it from your lens?
Well, you are certainly way more expert on this than me, but I begin with nobody listening to this is going to worry about where dinner is going to come from tonight. Nobody listening to this is worried about dying violently tonight. That those are the two basic human fears. And for many people who are lucky like us, they have been mostly eliminated. But we do all these other sorts of fears that rhyme with those fears, and we use them to paralyze ourselves, and the system uses us to get us to obey. So my friend Steve Pressfield calls resistance the feeling that we get that gives us writer's block. Writer's block is invented. The fear of public speaking, not based in survival in any way. It just rhymes with that. So the first thing to say is we should be really clear about kinds of fear. Given that that's the case, I view our modern sort of fear a little like a marathon runner thinks about being tired. Cannot run a marathon without getting tired. Doesn't make sense to go to a coach and say, teach me how to run a marathon without getting tired. That's part of the deal. There's marathon, you're going to get tired. Well, you cannot do creative work without fear. If you don't have fear, you're either a sociopath or, more likely, you're not trying hard enough. And so when I'm doing this work, I am looking for the fear, celebrating the fear, dancing with the fear, but not making it go away.
Yeah, we talk about being fear fighters. What is the largest fear we can find? That's the right fear. And then how do we, and this is, maybe I'm saying this because you're in New York and I'm a big Seinfeld fan. We're in the fear shrinkage business, right? Like, what is the fear that we should be going after? And like, how do you actually address it as a team or as a project? And I have to tell you, I was really surprised to hear you just say you're not trying hard enough, or I think you're right. I think this is the same as self-talk. I think when you don't have self-talk, we all have self-talk, but when you don't have debilitating self-talk, and that doesn't come, this is not trauma conversations. Like maybe you haven't figured out the right, meaty, courageous project to take on. Do you, maybe this, the question is, do you talk to yourself? Like, do you recognize when you're like, oh, this is a good fear for me. I'm enjoying this process.
I think I talk to myself more than most people. I also love semantics. So you made some interesting choices. You understand, many of your listeners don't, that courage and bravery are not the same thing. And you talked about shrinkage, and that's one of the great episodes along with the marble rye. But I'm not trying to shrink the fear. And, in New York, the fire department is called New York's bravest. And bravery can lead to tragedy because you run into a building that's burning without thinking about your fear. Courage means you know that the fear is there and you're dancing with it. You're not trying to make it go away. And the people who I've been able to help friends with their creative process and the essence of the practice is don't try to make the fear go away because it gets bigger when you do that. Try to make the fear bigger so you can live inside of it and be generous. Because generosity is actually the best response to fear. Generosity gets us to jump into the cold lake and help somebody, even though the water's cold, not because we did it for us, but because we did it for them.
When you think about your life, it's simple, right? Where was there a time where you felt, oh, wow, that was a moment where I needed true courage? Like, and it made a dent. Was there a moment for you, or is it constant?
There are lots of moments where I didn't have courage. And those are things I remind myself of when I am at a crossroads. There are people I didn't help. There are voices I didn't hear. There are opportunities I did not lean into. There were moments, trivial business moments, but also personal things where I shrunk away because I was feeling unfirm footing. And I don't like be in that situation. So figuring out how to play this game, because it is a game with boundaries and players and moves, helps one live a life that isn't always filled with drama. And so I'll give you a tiny business example. A guy named Josh Quittner wrote a story for Wired magazine 30 years ago about domain names. He bought McDonald's.com and then tried to give it to McDonald's. And he couldn't find anyone in the entire company who understood enough to take it. And I was aware of the internet. I was one of the few people who had access to it in those days. So I went online and I started buying domain names. And if I had bought the 100 domain names I was going to buy, that was a $40 million day. But I only ended up buying 6 of them because one of my coworkers said I shouldn't do it. And the fear that came with the word should just paralyzed me. And so I didn't buy business.com and I didn't buy flowers.com and yankees.com and all the other ones. And it's trivial because the world is fine without me having done that. But it was an interesting lesson to say, I didn't sign up to be a receptionist in a paperclip factory doing the same thing every day. Signed up to be a creator, signed up to be a leader, signed up to do things that might not work. So do it because that's what you're signed up for.
Are there moments now where you still run into those you shouldn't or you should? Or at this point, are you a Jedi at knowing, no, this feels like Seth, I'm going to pursue this?
Every day. Every single day I run into it. And knowing the difference between good judgment and raw fear is always hard.
You mentioned earlier a little bit of this relationship between courage and creativity and how one can fuel the other. What do you think the relationship is between those two words?
They both are way overused and little understood. Creativity does not mean making a Jackson Pollock painting or dressing up like a punk rocker. Creativity is simply solving an interesting problem in a way that might not work, that's also generous. And where most people get stuck is the it might not work part. And courage is taking a risk on purpose while dancing with fear. So at some level, unless you don't care about the people around you and you don't care about failing, creativity requires courage. And one of the things that happens in a successfully organized brainstorming session, we lower the amount of courage you need to be creative because we create social pressure to not be quiet. So you blurt out stuff. And that's why it exists, to make it so that you can have creativity without courage. But most of the time, they go together.
You talked about this brainstorm and you talked about process. And we're not good at like acknowledging systems. And I agree. By the way, I think excuse my French here, when process is shitty, you do see it. Like if I'm on a plane and I'm trying to get some work done and I hear the cart come down the aisle and clink someone's elbow and I can hear the process happening. Or usually process that's invisible is humming. Can you give us a couple tips about how we might go about creating psychological safe brainstorms where, to your point, courage is down? Like, how do you do that in a way where it fosters creativity?
Okay, let's come back to airline food in a minute. But I want to answer your question first. You've played Pictionary. Most people have played Pictionary. They're not as good at it as I am. And I will now tell you how to win at Pictionary every time. When you play Pictionary, it's charades with a pen. You draw something, your partner has to say the word. People almost always spend a fairly large amount of time drawing the correct picture. And they ignore the rule that says there is no penalty for bad guesses. So the correct way to play Pictionary is for your partner to start saying words and never stop. And you're interacting with their flow of words so that they get closer and closer. So I can get you to say Titanic really fast if you start talking while we're playing. Whereas if you're sitting there quietly waiting for the right answer, I have to draw an entire steamship before you say the word Titanic. So that culture, creating the condition for that culture means causing tension to happen until I do the thing that's creative that relieves the tension. So when I was running one of the first internet companies, I had 55 people whose offices were all in one big room. We had no walls. And every 90 days, everyone had to change where they sat. This was very stressful. Turns out it's one of the top 10 most stressful things that happen at work. But I did it because if I could numb you to the fear of, oh, I'm sitting somewhere, then it was easier to numb you to other fears. And we created this safe environment where you knew it was riskier to say nothing. And the other side of that was we had a room where we would brainstorm. And the rule was if you were in the room, you couldn't point out what was wrong with an idea, even if you were sure you were right. And Robin, who worked for me, broke the rule twice. And I sent her home. I said, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. You need to leave the office. Don't come back until you're ready to play by the rules. Because I wanted to send a message to the whole organization. In this room, you're not allowed to highlight the obvious or clear defects in an idea. You just feel pressure to say another idea.
Do we want to go back to airplane food, or do you want me to? Okay.
So we didn't really talk about systems. Why is airplane food so bad? And you can say it's because you're at altitude, but the real reason is airplane food is part of a system. And the system has many constituents, not just the person who is eating it. You have to please the people who are serving it. You have to please the people who are loading the carts onto the plane. You have to please the people who are filling the carts with food. You have to please the people who are preparing the food. You have to please the CFO. Pleasing all of those people is a system, and it leads to a particular kind of transaction in the food. And my friend, Amy Curtis McIntyre, was the second employee at JetBlue. And she saw this system and she realized there was no room to win. Don't play a game you can't win. So instead, she just completely removed the whole thing and gave flight attendants huge baskets of high value, expensive snacks, all wrapped, and said, insist customers take extra. Don't give one per person. If they take 2, ask them to take 4. It didn't matter if you walked off the plane with 9 bags of Famous Amos cookies. It was still cheaper than serving you airplane food. And she broke the system open. So either you're in the system or you're against the system.
I mean, so much good in there. And let's go back to, you've got all these great slogans, one being, don't play games you can't win. Another one I think is, a difference can be made, which that lands really well with me. Another is the audience can be chosen. Let's talk about what game you're playing. What game are you playing?
In a given day, there's a lot of different games. There are meta games. There's games inside of games. The game I am playing with you right now is how can I be just contrary enough and interesting enough that I'm the best guest you've had this year. The game I'm playing with the listener is how can I vary the pace and content of this so they don't want to turn it off, even though we're halfway through. The game I'm playing with the bookstore is I know you don't like carrying books by people like me. How do I create the conditions where you will want to carry a book like this one? The game I'm playing with my neighbors in the building where I work is how can I make it so they never notice me? Because if they start to notice me, they might want me to move out. And I'd rather be a helpful, quiet neighbor than one who's annoying. These are all games that have strategy.
You have another slogan that you say, you're not sitting in traffic, you are traffic. Give me some color there.
Okay, I did not make that one up. No one knows who did, though. It's very easy to complain about a system where we feel that we are a victim. But if you are in the system, you are part of the system, and therefore, at some level, you are the system. If you can't tolerate that, change the system or build a new one.
Let me know if I'm getting this right or wrong from your lens. Is this similar to when we say sometimes, oh, they, but we are the they?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Like if you're in traffic, your car is taking up just as much space. If you weren't there, traffic would be flowing better.
What inspires you to write this strategy now? And in your mind, how does it differ from previous works you've crafted on marketing and leadership?
So I'm so lucky that friends ask me for marketing advice. I don't do any consulting. And what I've discovered is they almost actually want strategy advice. They don't have a marketing problem. They have a strategy problem. So this was my answer to that. I think it's different because it's more holistic. Marketing can be boiled down to how do I get this particular customer to make the transaction that I need? Strategy is when systems and time and game come together and I add empathy to the mix, I'm in the whole world. How do I want to be in the world?
Earlier, you mentioned how you felt courage and creativity are overused words, perhaps maybe misunderstood. Is strategy in the same bucket?
Oh, worse. Worse. Because no one knows what it means. They think it means plans or tactics. Companies like to have, quote, strategic plans, as Michael Porter has pointed out, because plans are things you're in charge of. Plans show your agency. Plans can go through a committee. Strategy isn't up to you. You have a vote, but the world will have a say. It's not in your control. We don't like talking about things that are not in our control. We don't like talking about dying. We don't like talking about probability. We don't like talking about strategy.
I'm like befuddled by your comment earlier of a messy brain or messy writing style. Okay, let's call it that. But then also the power of systems. So, when does messy show up in your life versus when do systems show up in your life? Do you have moments that you find how ritualizes your writing? Is there specific times in a day when you write? I'd love to hear a little bit behind that.
Do you load the dishwasher at home?
Almost every evening after dinner, but sometimes we eat out, so there's no dishes to be loaded.
Because I'm not allowed. There are two kinds of people when it comes to loading the dishwasher. Some people want their cutlery in alphabetical order, everything perfectly organized, and some people just want the dishes to come out clean. I am in the second category. I am a utilitarian who says you need a process to get you the result. You don't need a process that is organized for its own sake. So I'm proud of my writing. I think it's more modern than a more traditional sort of writing that clears its throat a lot and is super taxonomy organized. But I believe it serves its purpose. So I don't waste any time whatsoever alphabetizing my cutlery because I don't see what the purpose of that is. And my writing practice is two parts. One, my job is to notice things that are working that I don't understand and then explain them. Many of us have been indoctrinated into accepting things we don't understand. That makes me frustrated. And then the writing practice is once you have something like that, write it down and write it down before it's finished and then make it better and continue that process until you're done.
It's great feedback. So you're just like constantly looking for little bites. Would you put yourself in I'm making up a word here. I was going to say contrarian, but I don't think that's what you are. Are you a tensionarian? Are you looking for attention and be like, oh, let me go see how we can shrink that down?
Maybe I'm curious. I do magic, but I don't believe in magic. And it's human beings, I think, are hardwired to want to believe in magic. So I need to know how electricity works. I need to know how a refrigerator makes things cold. I need to know why you can have a microwave oven, but not a microwave freezer. And most people don't care. I don't understand how you can go through life not caring about that.
So magic is our number 2 core value at Courageous. And the way that we define, and permission granted to I'd love your feedback on this. So we define courage as 3 levers. There's a knowledge piece, there's a faith piece, and there's an action piece, and you need all three, right? If you lose one, it's something else. So knowledge and faith without action is paralysis. Faith and action without knowledge is reckless. And knowledge and action without faith, if you're numb on the inside, you're probably working on status quo. So we try to help you think and feel and do and go.
Beautiful.
So our feeling about magic is that most people do want to feel the results of magic, but to the magician, it's not magic. They're prepared to do. I'm air quoting for those who are not watching. They're prepared to do the trick. It's not a trick to them. They're trained to do the thing, and it feels like magic. And then we want you to do it again and again and again and again. So we love magic, and we're probably more in your camp on the power of curiosity and learning, and also being generous and stepping into the shoes of the audience and making sure we're creating the intention of what the desired effect of why we do what we do. But I'm curious, were you ever a magician? Oh, here we go. Oh, stop it. Come on. I feel really guilty now for those who are just listening. And by the way, how you were like perfectly on cue, as if, and I do not share questions. You knew it was coming. This is part of your, yeah.
I love wonder. That's different. The words have changed meaning over time. Wonder is very hard for a 3-year-old. You do a magic trick to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they'll say, I know how you did that. They will say that because they want the wonder to go away. They have trouble sitting in wonder. I love wonder. I seek out wonder all the time. And the way I do my magic poorly is designed to create wonder for people. Whereas magic has come to mean either a kind of technology of manipulation that we don't understand or a trick. And I get the kind of magic you're talking about. I'm going to call that wonder, which is the awe of looking at something that feels impossible.
When you took on this new book, did you wonder if there wasn't enough wonder in the word strategy, which is why you took on the assignment?
I wrote every day for a month before I even thought I was writing a book. And I had this collection of writing based on a short talk that Martin Luther King Jr. did shortly before he was killed about the blueprint. And I was thinking about, what does it mean to have a blueprint for your life, for your work? You don't build a building without a blueprint, but we build a life without one all the time. And then I put my marketing hat on and I thought, well, if I call it the blueprint, I have to then explain to people what I'm writing about. Why don't I just call it something that they already think they know what it is and skip that step? So that's why it's called This Is Strategy.
Who else is part of your entourage to help you say, yeah, let's go with that title?
Okay. So I think creative people ask too much feedback, and they tend to ask it from amateurs. And this is a problem with being courageous, because if you ask an amateur for advice, someone who cares about you, they will always tell you, don't be courageous. They will almost tell you, always scale it back, because they care about you. Number two, amateurs are terrible at giving feedback. They don't understand. Like, you'll show someone a blog post or an essay, and they'll say, there's a typo in paragraph 3. Like, I got a computer for typos. I don't need your advice about typos. Can you think about this conceptually? And most people can't. So the number of people who I actually can do this professional brainstorming with is very small, because I don't show my work to amateurs anymore before I ship it.
Scary thought. You're asking a lot of people to read your books. This is strategy. We agree that maybe they understand strategy, maybe they don't. And that's not about belittling an audience, right?
Understood. So I did the second half of it is I then turned the book as I was writing it into 44 video lessons explaining what I was teaching. And then I had 350 people take the course. And I watched them interact with each other after each video. So I wasn't asking them for advice. I was doing the work with them. And based on what I saw them do, I had insight about how to make my work better. So there's a very big difference between asking well, here's the focus group story as we start to wrap this up. So a big electronics company has an expensive clock radio that they're coming out with years ago. And they do a focus group for 12 people. They bring a prototype and they're getting all this advice about the thing. And overwhelmingly, people are giving them enthusiastic responses. And then at the end, they say, thank you for being here. Now you have a choice. We'll give you $20 for the half hour of your time, or you can have one of the radios, which is going to sell for $100. And everyone took the $20. That was the most useful thing they learned in the whole time. Right? Because you were watching what people were doing, not what they were saying.
In the spirit of wrapping this up, the long-term thinking that you're hoping for, that people land on off of the book, this is strategy. How do you get people to pick up and stay the course on the book? I know that's your job as the writer, but more importantly, when someone picks a strategy at work, how long should they stick with that strategy?
Okay, so there's two questions here. The first one's easy. My job is not to get people to finish the book. My job is to get people to talk about it with somebody else. Where are the headquarters for Alcoholics Anonymous? Where's their ad campaign? Who's in charge? No one knows. The first rule of Alcoholics Anonymous is you always talk about being in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why it works, because you create a community of conversation, a community of practice. The goal here is we don't talk about strategy, and we need to. We need to decide to make things better. Community action is the only place better comes from. Second part, strategies should be easy to talk about and hard to stick with. They should be simple concepts about your approach to the game. And if the game changes, then your strategy should change. If the game doesn't change, then your tactics might need to change. Tactics are the steps, the short-term cycles we go through to make our strategy work. And so Patagonia's strategy hasn't changed in 15 years, but the items they sell can change.
Take us home. This is more a courage question. And when I think about the type of listener that's sponging up this material, we tend to get leaders. We tend to have people that are curious, that are looking to get ahead. And I think we have a lot of people that they're high potentials. They want to be leaders. They're on their way. What advice would you give someone who feels stuck right now and is afraid to maybe take the next big step in their career?
Well, first, thank you for your honesty in acknowledging that you might feel a little stuck and afraid. But I think the hack is to realize you shouldn't take the next big step. You should take a little step. That answering 3 customer service emails a day, going and starting a blog under an assumed name, things that are clearly riskless, but are outside of your comfort zone. If your habit is to do things that feel risky, and you keep doing that in a way that leads to no negative outcomes, you will get more comfortable at doing things that feel risky. The mistake we make is saying, no, I have to go all the way to the Olympics, to the TED stage, to the World Championship of Poker. No, you don't. When I think about the work I was doing 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, every one of those little steps is how I got here. Not because the phone rang and Chris Anderson said, come give a TED talk. Not how you get to where you're going.
I have a 2-parter and then we're good to go. And what, Seth, I so greatly value your perspective. So the first question is, if the roles were reversed and you were me asking you a question, knowing the topics, what would have been the question and how would you answer it? And I'll give you the second one now. which is, in your spirit of curiosity, what do you think I should explore more on the concept of courage?
Okay, so in the second one, community is what change comes from. So you are narrating for your extraordinary listeners a journey. But now we have all this technology that enables us to connect them to each other actively. And that might be a weekly Zoom with breakout rooms. It might be a platform like Discourse. It might just be a pamphlet, a booklet that people do with each other. But this ability to give people the home board game version of what you're doing is a huge leap forward. I would encourage you to figure out what that looks like. What would I have you ask me? Well, let's end with a smile, which is, where's the swag? Right? That I love swag. For those who have video, this was some of the swag that came with the practice. There was a dozen collectible containers. So this swag we're doing, the first time I'm talking about it, a collectible chocolate bar with Ashkenazi chocolate, a blend of 3 kinds of beans. There will be and they come with collectible cards inside that you can collect and trade. And there will be a deck that will be the end of bad strategy decks, an actual deck of decks that will show you how to talk about strategy. And there will be a 7-pack, and we're going to do some live events around the world. So the swag is half the battle, and it's been fun to create.
If you find yourself in San Diego, look me up. I think you're the Wonka of our business.
I'm trying, man.
You got me there from the chocolate. I mean, you are the Wonka, and thank you for all that you're doing. And I always leave with more than just a little value when I read your stuff or hear your stuff. Thanks so much, Seth.
Thank you, Ryan. Keep making a ruckus. We need you.
Take care, man. Be good.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.